What's up, fam? This is Kevin Bass from thedietwars.com, and I'm going to be doing this thread now. It says, as you guys can read if you're watching the YouTube videos, but I'll read it for you guys on the podcast. I will be doing 5 debunks in 5 minutes in a video tonight, starting with the protein to energy diet concept of Ted Naiman. Then I will run through Ted's timeline, debunking key claims, 5 debunks, 5 minutes. And the background for this is me and Ted had another tussle. We have this like every 3 months at this point where I say that Ted's not good, and then Ted says Kevin's not good, or vice versa. Ted says Kevin's not good, and I say Ted's not good. And so I got called out in this thread by a bunch of his followers, and some of them got quite hostile. I had to block a few. Playing taps here, dun dun dun. I had to block a few. They're now done, never to return. And but I wanted to back up some of my claims because I think Ted is pretty sketch. And he's going to say the same about me, or he's going to say I'm a jerk or something like that. But we're going to actually stick to the facts. So I want to do some 5 debunks to demonstrate some of my points. And then we'll try to do it in 5 minutes. I'm not sure if I can make it in 5 minutes, but that might be an exaggeration. It might have to be 10 minutes. Because I like to make my points marinate. Some people say I meander on my podcast, and maybe. But for me, I like to kind of fully explore and feel satisfied by the explanations that I give, and it takes me like a while to dive into feeling that way. So yeah, some people say get to the point, but I'm gonna do things my way. If you don't like it, don't listen. But I will try to do like close to 5 minutes, so 5 debunks in 5 to 10 minutes, trying to get close to 5 minutes, starting at the debunks. Now we've already been 2 minutes, but we're gonna start at the debunks, start the timer at the first debunk. But before we do, I want to I want to introduce myself, and then I want to introduce Ted. So I'm a medical student, an MD PhD student. I did my first 2 years of med school, so the basic science training, and then I did I've done forever in PhD land because the first lab I was in, I did my master's. I got that in a year. We were actually even thinking I could get the PhD done in two years, so like 1 additional year on top of that, maybe get the PhD done. But I was quite unhappy in my first lab because I didn't feel independent enough. I wasn't feeling I was thinking. I wasn't getting from the PhD what I'd wanted to get. So I'd actually transferred into the PhD program from med school because med school was like kind of mindless. We would just memorize stuff. So I went to the PhD like wanting something more out of it than just kind of mindlessly doing things. But then getting that PhD in like 2, maybe 3 years max, but maybe even as low as 2 years, just felt like I wasn't thinking at all. I wasn't making any decisions. I was just sort of like doing as, my professor told me to do, which is, it's fine. It's just like, it's not what I wanted out of the PhD. So, and maybe it would have changed later, to his credit. Maybe it would have changed later, and I would have grown into more independence, but at that time I just didn't want to continue doing it that way at that first year. So I went on to another lab, and then it was tough for me to find a lab that I fit in well, very independent thinking, and I'm very idealistic, and I'm still that way. So finally have a good lab. We might be, publishing on some fundamental physiology, overturning some fundamental dogmas and how ketogenesis works, maybe, if the data keep turning out good. And so I'm excited about that, and maybe it'll all be worth it in the end. But I've been in PhD land for a long time, and I'm about to start med school again next year. So about to finish the PhD, about to do the last 2 years of med school. So I'm a seasoned veteran in MD PhD academia, at least as far as like the pre-graduate level is concerned. I've been here for a while. Of course, I have a background in anthropology and in biology as well, and I have some lab experience. So that's me. And during this time, especially during the times whenever I've wasn't getting data for my PhD or had to wait for mine to breed, et cetera. I've been, as a hobby, it's like my main hobby, is I've been on the internet debunking misinformation. That's just kind of what I do, and it's fun for me. I like to argue. I feel like arguing is a way for me to actually clarify my own thoughts and come to a deeper understanding of what I'm learning about. Like the more I argue with somebody, like we go back and forth, iron sharpens iron. I feel like I become sharper and sharper and more understanding, and then I see my own points and how I'm in contradiction with myself and how I'm maybe being hypocritical, and then I have to refine my way of thinking. And through that process, I've become a better scientist, and through the process, of course, doing experiments at the same time, as I've been doing the literature process, reading the literature, interpreting, and arguing on the internet, I've become a better scientist. And so now I'm I'm a scientist in training, plus I'm fascinated by misinformation in the internet and talking about it. Ted is a doctor. He as far as I know, I can't introduce him the way that he would introduce himself, but I know that he's been involved in the low-carb world for a very long time. For like 10 years, he's been on all the podcasts, like and all the low-carb conferences. He's been in the paleo world to a great extent. He's been involved in, I think, at least one documentary that frankly peddled a lot of conspiracy theories about low-carb diets and dietary guidelines. It was Brian Sanders' documentary, what's it called? Food Lies. I believe he was like a main person involved in putting that together. And he was affiliated, associated with Brian for a while. He really believed in the carbohydrate insulin model, which is debunked. It's like nonsense. And he's slowly pivoted to this new protein versus energy, or protein to energy ratio concept. But along the way of having this concept, he's also picked up a lot of paleo and low carb pseudoscience, and he still hangs on to that and promotes it. He is probably on the best terms of any low carb paleo person with the evidence-based world, and the reason is he's so nice. He's so nice. He's like such a bro. He's such a relaxed, casual bro. I'm not like, I don't I have a lot of friends in the science-based world. I get along with a lot of people in the science-based world, and most people in many ways, and even if on the rare occasions when I'm not, like, I still have respect for them, and I think our doors are all open for each other in sort of the evidence/science-based world, with rare exception. But it's not my style to be like this friendly, like relaxed bro. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that whenever it comes, for me, like, science is important. I'll argue with you, and that includes people in the science-based world. And respect comes from, being able to argue and put your points out and to teach me. So I learn a lot from my friends. Like, I learn like most of what I know from my friends, right? Through exchanges, through scientific exchanges. These discussions about what the literature says. Whenever I engage with Ted, I don't get anything like that from him. I'll say something about what he says, this is wrong, Ted, and I don't get like a clear response like, oh, well, that you make a good point, therefore blah, 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 or, oh, Kevin, no, you're mistaken on this point, therefore blah, blah, blah. I don't get him teaching me anything. I don't get him changing his views, and he just constantly, I'm gonna say it right now, he constantly says things that are wrong. It's constantly wrong, and it's maddening to me because of the way he does it, because he's so friendly in the way he's wrong. Like, he's not, and he uses like friendliness as like a way to diffuse the situation, but it's not like actually engaging in a substantive manner. It feels just shallow to me, and I'm like, why are you just like, so while a lot of other people, to come full circle, because people say I'm meander, but I'm going through the full issue. While other people find Ted to be charming and I guess diffusing of any tension that might arise from the wrong stuff that he says, I find him maddening. I find his style maddening, his communication style completely maddening. And I for a while, I felt like I was the only one to feel this way, and which is even more frustrating. I was like, why doesn't anybody understand? But in fact, I made a thread, like as I'm showing here, this thread, And then I said, this is not something I want to do. I dislike this. I may be pulling out my hair for this video because I genuinely don't like this, because I'm doing it because people are asking me to do it. But the reason I don't like it is because it's just like, Ted's not really serious. He'll make a joke about the claims that I try to debunk of his. He'll make jokes. He just like, he doesn't take anything seriously, it feels like. He doesn't like care about getting the facts right. He just kind of cares about like looking good and looking cool and being right. It really feels that way to me. And so I don't like doing this because it's like every time I engage him, it feels like I'm going up against a brick wall, really. A brick wall that's like not rational and doesn't really care and just uses these humor defense mechanisms, which is a good defense mechanism. I love humor as a defense mechanism. I use it quite a lot myself in order to maintain sanity. But when it comes to like science, you need to own up to what you're saying. Is what you're saying right or wrong? And you need to own up to whether it's right or wrong and change accordingly if you need to change. And that's how science needs to be done. You don't need the defense mechanisms to protect your ego whenever you're wrong. You need to own up to when you're wrong. And so I don't like criticizing him because it's like I know he's not going to own up, and I feel like it's just wasted energy on my part. And I don't like the vibe I get from him whenever I criticize him. I feel like I'm personally offending him, and then he's like trying to joke it off and laugh it off, and like I don't like that vibe. It just feels very like okay, dude, like you're gonna take this personally. You're gonna try to joke it off in order to like not make you feel bad about it. I feel bad now. Like I feel bad whenever I criticize him because I feel like he's like hurt on some level. But I also feel bad because it's frustrating because I'm like, if you're hurt on some level, you're not thinking scientifically. That's not the right way to do it. So altogether, I just tend to avoid it, but then like sometimes he'll say something and then that makes me like, ugh. And then I'll say like, this is nonsense, or you're full of nonsense, or sometimes he'll say something about me, like he doesn't like me. And then I'll like say, you're dishonest. Like, and then we have these very superficial back and forths where we don't actually get to the substance of the issue because I don't want to engage. But here I'm going to engage, even though I don't really like doing it because I don't feel like this is going to be a real scientific exchange, but because people are asking me to do it and they want to know about Ted. They want to know what I really think. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to engage on this now. What's great about this thread, though, which is what I was getting to, was that some people actually confirmed and validated some of my thoughts without me even saying them, which is beautiful. And it came down to Escape Low, Rethink, this guy who many in our circle, my circle, like we argue with each other about who Rethink is. Like we suspect that he's like some famous scientist or something. It's like we accuse each other of being Rethink because he says things that are so on point and funny, but he's in an anonymous account. But he's not on point about a lot of things, and he got it, and like him and another guy. So he says, I have some time for Ted because I think he's a morally superior creature to many in the low-carb delusional space. Okay, that's what he said. I'll say this. I get where he's coming from, and I think a lot of people feel this way about Ted. And I think this is why he gets away with so much. Because he's a nice person, he's like gentle, he's relatively gentle, despite being full of crap. He's gentle, so at least he's not like toxic and like he's not like Tro, or he's not like Asim Malhotra, right? Or he's not like me. He's a very agreeable. He's very high in agreeableness, and he's not gonna be a toxic moron who's gonna block you and like say bad things and then like be anti-vax and all this stuff. He's not gonna do the crazy stuff that a lot of like low carb gurus do. So people like, they're cool with him. So Rethink is reflecting a lot of thinking that I think is very common, extremely common, almost universal among science-based people about Ted. And then Rethink says, however, I'd like to hear criticisms, Kevin, as I think he has overpromoted a protein satiety hypothesis that goes too far and doesn't fit with the evidence. I agree with that. But it's more than that. It's more. And I have a long experience here. This is why I say there's more. And I think a lot of people are overlooking things because they haven't looked much into it as much. But because Ted, I think, in public only tends to promote a couple ideas, but I've been familiar with him for a long time. And this is what a lot of what I'm going to be saying is based on. So I responded to him. I said, Ted is such a bizarre case This is what I think. He's clearly as pseudoscientific as a ton of the other grifters, but because he is widely liked by many people in the evidence-based world, they can't see that. It's so freaking strange to me. It really is. It's like, why am I like one of the only ones who sees this? But I got some validation here. So Jason Kotenko says, to be honest, I think it's because the things he suggests are not obviously harmful, unlike many of the other grifters. Eating lean meat and vegetables seems pretty innocuous. And I said, I don't think that is the explanation. Simply pretending that keto is the be-all, end-all of weight loss attracts a lot of ire. What's the difference between that messaging and Ted's messaging about the PE diet? By the way, this is not the only issue, but like because he kind of like did that, I wanted to, like I met his point with another point, but there's a bunch of other points I have as well. But meeting his point with that other point, I said, what's the difference between keto promotion, the BS keto promotion is going to solve all your problems, etc., and Ted's idea that protein leverage is the only thing that's important? How is that like less pseudoscientific? And then Jason said, it's not keto though. It's selecting the foods with a high protein energy ratio. It happens to coincide with pretty healthy foods overall and rules out almost all unhealthy snacks, fast food, etc., even the keto versions. And I said, lots of unhealthy foods are included in that. Like, for example, he does like red meat and like processed meat and stuff like that. Plus many healthy foods are ruled out, like grains, like oatmeal, like whole grains. It's actually extremely similar to the foods that keto promotes, with the exception of the inclusion of tubers. Why it's keto. And I don't know why it includes tubers, because tubers are low in protein. It doesn't even make sense why it includes tubers, but it does if you understand Ted's background, which we'll talk about in a moment. And this is already turning into a super long video. Like, I'm sorry. This is how I do. I like to talk, so we're gonna turn this into a long video. But with the exception of tubers, it's just keto. This is like his keto. Let's look at it real quick, actually. Let's look at it. Let's look at Ted's website. We're gonna do this real quick. We're gonna go back through his website. This is gonna be an hour video. I'm sorry, guys. We gotta thoroughly go through this. I love it. So here's his like meat. Here's his PE diet. These are all the foods that are included in the PE diet. Bros, like my bros, this is freaking paleo. This is paleo, with the exception of like fermented dairy, which almost in some ways is paleo-ish. Like as long as it's fermented, like that's kind of like a borderline case, because when you ferment, you get rid of like the antigens that are going to be toxic to you, because regular dairy has proteins that have these antigens that are toxic to human health. So when you ferment the the dairy, then it becomes healthy and more paleo-like. So paleo people can sometimes like add fermented dairy as being paleo okay. But besides that, it's like paleo. It's got meat, eggs, seafood, herbs and spices, fermented dairy, vegetables, mushrooms, low sugar fruit, and there's like not real fruit here. It's like peppers and like citrus and like not even citrus. I don't even know what that is. That's like it's something else. Cucumbers, eggplant, like zucchini. It's like not even a fruit. It's not even what we think about fruit. It's like he excludes fruit. It's like you can't have an apple. There's like no apples in this picture, bros. It's like you can't even have an apple. You can't have a blueberry or strawberry or raspberry. It's not a low sugar fruit. It's a high sugar fruit. Can't have it. It's important to note, okay? And he says nuts and seeds are okay. And tubers. This is all paleo diet. All right? It's a paleo diet. This is very clearly a paleo diet. Okay, cool. So or keto paleo. It's like low carb paleo. It's like a keto paleo hybrid, which is very common in this space. So I said with the exception of tubers, it's keto. So he says, I'm still interested in your takedowns. I'm probably missing something because I don't follow them any longer, but that was my impression. I said, I'm not even interested in my own takedown, but I don't want to talk about it. It's like, it frustrates me. Let's see what else we got, because there's something somebody else said. Oh, and then I said after this part about with the exception and inclusion of tubers, it's keto. He says, I'm not sure I agree. It's explicitly low fat, which is a huge difference from keto, right? No self-respecting keto bro would put butter at this place on their chart. Where's butter? I think butter might be at the bottom. Where's butter? Something like at the bottom. I think it's at the bottom. Whatever. And I said, now it's nutrient to energy ratio. I thought it was protein to energy ratio. This drives me insane. Like, we'll get into it. And he says, the theory is obviously BS and incoherent. Oh yeah, here's where Rethink jumps back in. And this is so on point with Rethink. This is so on point. He says, Ted and Dave Feldman have similar energy. Oh, so on point. Dave Feldman is basically the LDL denier who pretends it's not about LDL denialism. He has all this stuff about LMHRs, whatever. How much time do I got left? I got 15 minutes left. We gotta get through this. Nice guys, but it seems perplexingly drawn to the putrid miasma of low-carb keto grifters and snake oil salesmen and adherent to the carbs are quite bad bottom line. And then Jason says, I definitely put Feldman into a worse category. He's promoting an obviously unhealthy lipid profile to his own personal game. Ted at least is far less dangerous, in my opinion. And then Rethink says, I agree, but he does it all with an agreeableness that few other grifting low-carb types possess. He's much more personable than Malhotra, Taubes, Noakes, or Fung, for example, who are just very difficult to tolerate if you're a science-based person. Jason says, right, that's what makes him more dangerous. The idiots who pose shirtless with spears are obvious. He comes across as innocent while just doing public science that happens to glorify valuing physique at the cost of incredibly high LDL-C. And then I said, you guys are catching my vibe. I'm glad I'm not completely alone on this one. Okay, so for the first time, I have some validation from some folks about this. Okay, cool. That's all I wanted to point out. Like, there's at least 2 people on the internet who agree with me, my overall view. But now, after 21 minutes of my 5 minutes, 5 points in 5-minute debunking, after 21 minutes, I'm now going to actually get into the concrete detail. And I'm not going to just do it in his timeline because I've actually found a more concentrated source of misinformation for Ted's misinformation, and that's on his website. I'm actually going to start with his photos. I'm going to start with his photos. Okay, we actually got 14 minutes. In 14 minutes, I'm going to do 5 debunks. Let's do it. Bam! So here's his photos, and he loves posting his photos on Twitter. Like, he constantly posts himself shirtless. And so some people calls like shirtless Ted or topless Ted. It's topless Ted because he's always topless. This is the first bit of misinformation. This was him a while ago before low carb, or before he got into the dieting world, became into fitness. Like, this is cool Ted. I guess he's in his 20s or 30s here. And this is like Ted, ripped Ted. He's in his like 40s or 50s here, like early 50s maybe. And so the idea is like, after he discovered this diet and this new way of eating and living and blah, 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 he like transformed to this skinny fat dude into this ripped man. Okay, first point here. First point. First of all, he's not like skinny fat here in the left side. If he's not working out or dieting or doing anything, he's just following like a normal, healthy lifestyle, and he's just like riding his bike to commute and like he's not doing anything, like, any lifting, he looks like freaking great for like an average American. What do I mean by that? His abs are almost popping out. They might even be popping out here. He might even have abs here. Now, this goes to the second point. The lighting here in the photo on the right versus the photo on the left is very, very different. It's very, very different to the point that it's misleading. Because the lighting on the right-hand side is really showing his definition, and the lighting on the left-hand side is not. So we don't actually even know if he has abs here or not. He might even have abs that are nearly as strong as the side on the right side. He might even have abs almost as strong. And that's without working out or doing anything. It's not without falling in fitness. He's obviously not lifting here, but he's already got abs that are popping, right? Clearly he has super lean genetics. And let's say he's slightly fatter in the left-hand side than on the right-hand side, like, less than 5% body fat difference, probably less than 5% body fat, probably 4% body fat difference. Even if he's a little bit fatter here, he's clearly got great genetics, and you just add lifting and other stuff and dieting and stuff to it, then you just trim off that last bit of body fat, and all of a sudden your abs are like popping out strong. He's already starting from an enormous advantage here. And he's misrepresenting to the degree that he is starting to with an enormous advantage by the lighting, right? You can't actually see how defined he is on the left side versus the right side. The right side is specially made to showcase his physique. The left side is not. left side in some ways downplays any potential physique that he might have. The next issue is on the right side, he has a pump, right? In order to get the way he looks right there, he lifted a bunch of weights really hard to get his muscles pumped up so that he could look great. On the left side, he doesn't have a pump. I wonder what it would look like on the left side if you gave him a pump on the left side, you had him lift a bunch of reps of weights, get the blood filling his muscles, and put him in the same lighting. And I bet he would look quite similar on the left side as he does the right side. Now, maybe he's gained 5-10 pounds of muscle, but the difference is actually incredibly small and very misleading because of the light, because of the pump. It's very misleading. He naturally has great genetics, and then he just added a bit extra to it, maybe 5 pounds of muscle, maybe. And then he manipulated lighting and a pump in order to make his muscles pop. This is really misleading. You could probably achieve these gains in photo shooting, these photo shoot gains. You could probably achieve this in 6 months starting from the left side. 6 months. He's already starting from a great base in terms of his leanness, and then you just throw on a pump and lose a little bit, like 5 pounds of fat, and then you look like you do on the right side, man. That's my argument. I don't even know that he necessarily progressed a huge amount from the left to the right side. I don't even know that. I'll add in creatine. Creatine might also pump his muscles even more. You know, like creatine's like 5 pounds of water in his muscles. Creatine alone might account for like half of the difference in terms of the muscle mass, apparent muscle mass, right? So automatically there's a misrepresentation. People who don't understand how photo shoots are done and how you can manipulate lighting to look great, they'll think that like there's this massive difference between it. There's actually not. This is a misrepresentation of his progress. This is not a fair set of photos. And many people on TikTok and stuff have demonstrated this by making people who would look lean and ripped one day, they could look fat one day, and then look lean and ripped the next, just by manipulating lighting. Spencer Nadolsky has shown this kind of stuff. It just really misrepresents the progress. And he's basically just leveraging his great lean genetics to sell a diet. This is genetics. Like, the reason he looks this way is genetics. It's not a special diet. It's clearly genetics, even if you look at his old pictures. Okay, that's the first bit of misinformation. Hey everybody, I'm gonna finish this up in another room. Give me a moment, I'm gonna close the door. I'm gonna finish this up in another room because that room's computer's updated at 11 o'clock and I ran out of time. It's clear to me now that there's no way I'm gonna finish 5 debunks in 5 minutes, not because I can't just like cite sources and say, oh, here's it debunked, but because in order to debunk something, you have to actually explain why it's wrong. You have to do so in a comprehensive and persuasive manner, and I simply can't do that in 5 major points in 5 minutes. It's superficial, it's shallow, it's not gonna actually convey the message. And if I'm gonna actually do the debunks and sort of walk away and be like, that was comprehensive, that was complete, then I'm going to want to take a little bit of extra time so that I don't have to revisit and argue about these things again. And just, I don't want to get into a back and forth. I just want to okay, let's be comprehensive. Let's finish it. If they have a good point, that's good. We'll deal with the good point. But I don't want to have to continue to explain my points. So I'm going to comprehensively do it. It'll maybe take 15 minutes. We did the first point with respect to his physique. I just want to point out something really brief because this is important. It's super important. He has many pictures. This is how he markets himself. He constantly posts these shirtless pictures, as you guys can see from this window. He has 1 million shirtless pictures. He's just constantly taking shirtless pictures. And then he always compares these shirtless pictures with this excellent lighting, this perfect lighting, to his picture with this terrible lighting and low resolution. He's always comparing the perfect picture to the worst picture you could possibly find of him in the past with terrible lighting. And it's just really unfair. And that's all I want to point out. It's this is how he markets himself. This is how he gets people to listen to him. But it's not a fair representation of the difference. The difference is just mostly because he added like 5 or 10 pounds of muscle and lost like 5 pounds of fat. And he's already naturally super lean and genetically gifted in the leanness department. And then he gets a big pump, and maybe he has creatine in his muscles, and then he says, oh, look, it's a radical transformation. It is not. It is a misrepresentation. That's the first debunking. But we're going to get more substantial and substantive here and start banging on the science. So what's the second debunking? That's going to be the PE diet itself. So the PE diet is the name of his book. It's called The PE Diet. As you guys can see here, the website needs to load because it takes a long time to load because he has like all this weird graphics on it. It's called the PE Diet. Leverage your biology to achieve optimal health. And leverage, the word leverage refers to protein leverage in particular. Leverage your biology. So leverage your biology by eating like meat and cheese and all this other stuff. And don't eat carbs. Don't eat bread. Because that's going to be high in protein and low in energy. You want to have high in protein and low in energy. Well, this is pseudoscience on a lot of levels, but let's start with the fact that when you actually look at studies, for example, Barbarossa's castrol study, it's called Increasing the Protein Content of Meals and Its Effect on Daily Energy Intake. It's published in the Journal of the American, Dietetics Association in 2011. They gave people casseroles that had protein hidden in them, so there was such a way that you couldn't tell how much protein was in them. You could only, I think it was chopped up like tiny little bits of chicken chopped up, such that you couldn't tell how much chicken was in the meals, and that it varied in the protein content from 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30% of energy. And there was a crossover trial that then tested how much they ate afterwards, and they found that there's no difference in the energy intake after each of these casserole meals, meaning that the additional protein percentage didn't provide any additional satiety. There's no satiety differences whatsoever. So even though you increase your protein percentage, you had no difference in reported satiety or in energy intake after the meals. This invalidates, to a certain extent, protein leverage. It shows that protein is not as satiating as often proposed. One of the interpretations by Chris Gardner, professor at Stanford, professor of nutrition at Stanford, very good scientist, is that it's not protein itself that's satiating, it's protein-containing foods, which is extremely important because if that's the case, then just taking an energy drink, taking extra protein in that form is not going to help you at all with your satiety. It's going to actually be misleading. It's going to hurt you because you're going to think that you're taking in more protein, you're increasing your P to E ratio of your overall diet, but in fact, you're just going to increase your calories because you're going to take that protein in, and then you're going to still be hungry. If this is all correct, that protein doesn't add any additional satiety, that's just like one point, because as I said, we got to be comprehensive in our debunking, so let's hammer some other points. Let's go nail it. Next point is in Kevin Hall's study. This one published in 2021, I believe, January, called The Effect of a Plant-Based Low-Fat Diet versus an Animal-Based Ketogenic Diet on Ad Libitum Energy Intake. This is a metabolic ward study. Everybody was given these meals. All their food was perfectly tracked, et cetera, et cetera. And the interesting finding was that the low-carb diet produced a much larger energy intake than the low-fat diet. Well, why is that important? Because if you look at the diet composition of the low-carb diet, it's slightly higher in protein. In fact, 1.5% of the total calories more from protein in the low-carb diet, yet there's a dramatically higher intake of food in the low-carb group. Why is that? Well, it's because protein is not the determining factor of food intake. It's a dramatically higher calorie intake. So in the low-carb diet group, it's like 2,700 calories, and the low-fat diet group is like 2,000 calories. So it's like a 700 calorie difference. It's like a 25%, more than a 25% difference in calorie intake, like a 30% more calories in the low-carb group. 30% more calories, bros. 30%, yet a higher protein percentage. So much more protein was taken in overall. Because it's a higher protein percentage with more calories, there's much, much more protein taken in. Yet, that didn't stop people from eating. bam, invalid. And like it just like falsifies that this is an overwhelmingly important variable to be concerned with. What's another thing that invalidates this? Another thing is if you look at the Satiety Index by Holt, published in I think 1995. It's called Satiety Index of Common Foods. It's published by Holt, Ginny Brand Miller, Peter Pitos, and I'm going to screw this up, E. Pharmakalides, some Greek name that is hard to pronounce. Figure 3. Look at Figure 3. Porridge. Porridge is one of the most satiating foods in the Satiety Index score. We're not going to go through the details of the study. You can find those details in another place. Maybe I'll make a standalone video. But porridge is one of the most satiating foods here, right? Porridge is oatmeal. How much protein does oatmeal have, man? How much protein does oatmeal have? Nutrition facts. Let's go. Nutrition facts of oatmeal. 25 calories. 25 calories is 5 grams of protein. 5 grams of protein is 20. That's 20 calories. So oatmeal is like a little more than 20% protein. It's not a high protein, and then the rest is just carbs and fat. It's not a high protein meal. It's not super high in protein. It's not anywhere near as high in protein as some of these other foods, like steak, like fish. It's not a protein-rich food. It's not the protein-rich. It's a cereal. It's a grain. It's a grain. Right? Very high satiety, relatively low protein, yet it's one of the most satiating foods that's known. It's another example, potatoes, right? Potatoes are also an incredibly satiating food. And potatoes. And then porridge is more satiating than steak, baked beans, eggs, cheese, and lentils. Slightly less than fish, right? It's the third most satiating food in the Satiety Index. And it's higher than all the other meats except for fish. And potatoes is right next to it. Potatoes is extremely low in protein. Potatoes is extremely low in protein. What's potatoes at? Potatoes is like, so 163 calories in one medium potato and 4.3 grams of protein. It's like a, 2/3 of what the protein is in oatmeal, yet it's much more satiating than oatmeal. Fascinating. Showing that oatmeal and potatoes are highly satiating despite a low amount of protein. For potatoes, it's like 15%, 10 or 15% protein. Right? So how do you square that with the PE idea? Right? How do you square Barbara Rolls' study? How do you square Kevin Hall's study? You can't. You can't. So I'm going to go in depth, even more in depth on protein leverage and the PE idea, why PE is false. Because I want to do 5 in 5 minutes. I just can't. Because we got to do it comprehensive. I don't want to deal with more of this Ted Naiman stuff. We're going to do 5 debunkings. And if Ted wants to keep saying like I'm wrong and get his followers to mob me, then we're going to do 5 more after this. We're going to do 10 total, but that's a part 2. We're going to do the part 1 here. So if protein leveraging theory was true, then why doesn't eating protein eliminate appetite? Barbara Rolls' casserole study showed that protein is not uniquely satiating. Therefore, Ted Naiman's diet theory is wrong. PE is wrong. P to E ratio diet is wrong. It's wrong. It's like misinformation. It's misinformation. And it gets richer. We're going to get richer here. I said the second link above is Barbara Rolls' casserole study. The first link is a lay summary explaining how and why the study was done and its findings. You guys can see this on the YouTube video, the particular links, and then you can find it on the YouTube find it on Twitter if you search. But I said to make it really easy, and I just summarized some of those findings, but we're going to keep going. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about this. Daily energy intake did not differ significantly. It did not differ significantly across the 10% to 13% protein conditions, 30% protein conditions. 1870, 1887, 1848, 1876, and 1807 across all the different conditions. Despite the 24-hour protein intake varying from 44 to 82 grams from the lowest to highest casserole group. So a doubling in protein caused no change in total calorie intake in the study. That's Barbara Rolls' study, my friends. And it says conclusions, when the appearance, taste, fat content, energy density were controlled, and they're all controlled, simply adding meat to lunch and dinner entrees to increase the protein content within commonly consumed amounts was not an effective strategy to reduce daily energy intake. Falsification. All right. I said the advantage to the Roll study was that it controlled for expectation. It was blinded and for calorie density. While short term, these design features give it some advantages over other studies. That said, let's look at some of these other studies. And I said in Kevin Hall's paper, and he has a paper called, let's make sure we get the citation for you guys. Did the food environment cause the obesity epidemic? In Kevin Hall's paper, he has a section called Is It Protein? And I'm going to just cite the particular passage in which I'm drawing from. He's going to say, one study conducted by the originators of the protein leverage model found a significant short-term increase in ad libitum energy intake when a low-protein diet was compared with a moderate protein diet. However, two larger and longer studies failed to reproduce the effect. And I actually dove into these studies. I dove into each one of these studies. I've done this actually over direct messages. I've done this twice with Kevin Hall, because the first time, whenever I made this thread, and then I did it again by accident like a month or two ago, because then I started talking about protein leverage again, and then we started talking about the same studies again, and halfway through the messaging, I realized we had the same exact the same exact discussion with the same exact conclusions 9 months before that. I was like, Kevin, we're repeating the same conversation, but it's clear each time you look at it. It's clear each time you look at it. So I said the first study by Eat Like Animals, and Eat Like Animals is the account of David Robbenheimer and Professor Stephen, I think Simpson. Make it Stephen Simpson, okay? I said the first study by these guys tested 10%, 15%, and 25% protein intakes over a 4-day crossover trial in a metabolic ward. It found the energy intake was different between the 10 and 15% protein intakes, but not between the 15 and 25% protein intakes. Okay, that might suggest that protein leverage works at the lower end. So if you have a low protein intake and you increase it to a moderate or high protein intake, increasing it even higher than the moderate intake doesn't help, but at least increasing it to the moderate intake helps. So at low protein intakes, you're going to get a high intake of energy, but increase it a little bit, then you're going to get a lower intake, and then increasing it more doesn't help in addition to that. So you do get, at the lower end of protein intakes, some protein leverage effect. So I said, thus this corrects a low intake, thus correcting a low intake with higher protein caused a benefit, but not going further. This would seem to conflict with the recommendation to eat high quality protein to reduce energy intake. So you don't need to eat a high protein diet to reduce energy intake. You just need to not eat a low protein diet. You could eat a moderate protein diet, and that's enough. That's the idea. Or would it? However, the next two trials showed a different result. Using an intake of 5%, 15%, or 30% over the course of 4-day crossover periods, each of these trials found, the first one, no difference in energy intake between the 5 and 15% group, but a decrease between the 15 and 30% group. It's the opposite effect. So there's no difference between the low and moderate intake, but then when you get to the high intake, that's whenever you see a difference. Why do you see a totally different pattern? And I said, to reiterate, first trial, lower energy intake in the 10% versus 15% protein, but no difference between the 15% and 25%. Second, third trials, no difference between the 5 and 15%, but it's lower energy intake in the 25 versus 15%. If we were to combine all these findings into one graph, it would look like this. I made a really weird thing. I made a really weird graph that combines what they would all look like in terms of a line, where energy intake goes down at 5%, drops back, goes back up at 10%, back down at 15%, stays stable between 15 and 25%, and drops at 30%. And I said there are two possibilities to explain this. The first is that protein accounts for all these effects, but that there are multiple mechanisms at play that all depend on protein percent, which operate at different protein thresholds. If we therefore posit that protein accounts for all these effects, the so-called protein leverage theory is false, since protein leverage is not only the operative mechanism explaining energy intake changes from protein percent changes. Several mechanisms are at play. In that case, protein leverage is wrong. The second possibility to explain these effects is confounding by other variables such as caloric density, expectancy bias, fiber content, etc., which are different between trials and which may account for the apparent impact of protein. In that case, protein leverage is wrong, because it can't just be about protein. Other factors are also important. That's where the role study linked at the beginning in this thread comes into play: control for caloric density and expectancy bias. Yet the role study was in normal weight women, possibly limiting the generalizability of the findings. Either way, the gold standard trial showing protein leverage actually showed the interplay of a number of unknown mechanisms. This is the only way to interpret these trials. We still do not fully understand what accounts for these discrepant findings, but whatever it is, whether it is due solely to protein or some confounding variables, is not such a simple mechanism as protein leverage. Whatever. So where do we go from here? The existing literature do not show that protein leverage accounts for the impact of protein and energy intake or that lack thereof. The effect of protein and energy intake has never been shown to be linear and may only exist at very high or low intakes. Therefore, to pretend that the only issue is to eat more protein is not science-based. It hasn't been shown by any study that protein has a linear impact on energy intake. Therefore, protein leverage is an oversimplification at best and might in fact, with better data such as roles, be shown to be false. Protein does reliably improve body composition and metabolic outcomes, but protein per se cannot confidently be said to account for the impact of protein-containing foods and energy intake. It certainly has never been shown to do so in linear fashion. Bam, my friends. I mean, that's all I got. And like that falsifies this idea that all you need is focus on your PE, your protein to energy ratio. And look at that beautiful graph on this book. This protein to energy ratio, you got the meats at the top, and like stuff like cheese and bread at the bottom. It's all bad, but then meat is good. That's it. Just like, I feel dumb now. I feel like dumber than I did before. Like here's Ted's baseline diet. As you can see here, it's like there's 6 foods he eats: grass-fed beef, pastured eggs, wild-caught salmon, plain Greek yogurt, low sugar fruit, and shellfish. And his low sugar fruit, he has like a bell pepper. He eats bell peppers, I guess, by themselves. Based on, again, these are all high protein foods because it's the protein energy ratio that's important. And that's what's going to cause your effects. So I'm just like saying that's an oversimplification. It's wrong. Whatever. So Ted responds. He says, I'm a fan of Dr. Rolls. He responded last year. He says, I'm a fan of Dr. Rolls, and I would be perfectly comfortable saying that energy density is at least as important as protein, or maybe significantly more important. I'm giving it equal importance here, but no, this does not invalidate protein leverage. So if energy density is more important than protein leverage, why isn't his book about energy density? Why doesn't he message about energy density? Why doesn't he emphasize that energy density is important? The interesting thing about the study, Barbara Rose's study, all the foods has the identical energy density, right? Identical energy density and dramatically different protein from 10 to 30%. Yet, despite a difference of 10 to 30% protein, there's no difference in intake of energy, despite the same energy density. So if energy density is more important, it must be like overwhelmingly important, so that if energy density is not changing and protein is changing to a huge degree, then you're not going to see an effect because maybe protein's so minor it doesn't even matter if you're keeping energy density the same. I don't know how to even interpret what he's saying here. It's like protein is shown not to be important here, essentially. And then he backpedals a bit on this, and later that year in October he says, just a suggestion. Instead of this role study, which appears to her biases perfectly, as it appears to be specifically designed to make protein percentage look less powerful than energy density, read anything on humans by Robbenheimer and Simpson. Just saying. I actually just made a thread with 3 studies that are relevant to Robbenheimer and Simpson. I actually read Robbenheimer and Simpson's paper as well. I read their paper because they responded to me as well. I read their paper. I don't see anything. Like, if you look at the human trials, the human studies, it doesn't support protein leverage. It doesn't. I just went through 4 studies. 5, including Kevin Hall's study. They don't support protein leverage. I don't know where he's saying you just need to read Robbenheimer and Simpson. I read Robbenheimer and Simpson. Is Ted reading Robbenheimer and Simpson? Is he reading it critically? I don't think so. I think he's trying to do handstands on live stream. so people can see his handstands he does on live stream, and then he's getting a pump, and he's like taking pictures of his torso. I think that's that's what Ted is doing. I don't think he's reading Robbenheimer and Simpson carefully. I don't think he's reading these studies carefully. And he's making money off of this book. Like, I'm confused. I'm genuinely, like, I don't know where he's getting this from. Like, what? Okay. All right, so that's the PE idea. Like, protein leverage, protein doesn't matter that much, and it's not supported by the human data at all. Other factors are much more important. So focus on those other factors if you want to lose weight. Don't focus on P to E ratio. How much protein, what percentage of protein is not going to matter compared to other factors. Oh, I didn't do 4 studies, I did 5 studies. Also the satiety index, right? Potatoes and oatmeal. Those foods falsify the hypothesis. And importantly, if you look at Ted's recommended foods, they certainly don't include oats. There's no oats here. Oats are not allowed. Oats are not allowed. They're not allowed. He doesn't allow oats. He allows tubers, which have nothing to do with protein energy model, by the way. So the PE diet, which he includes tubers, actually, the inclusion of tubers goes against the PE diet principles. But it's included in the PE diet, and other things that also work almost as well as tubers to increase satiety are not included in the PE diet. Like, why? What is the rules here? It's like inconsistent. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Let's see what we got. We're gonna hit some other points. So we did 2 things: misrepresentation in terms of his body, misrepresentation in terms of protein leverage, and the whole PE diet altogether. So those are his core marketing tools: his body, his physique, and then the PE diet literature itself, which I went through all the data. You can check out my Twitter thread. I'm going to actually read out the link so that you guys can find it if you're listening to the podcast. It's twitter.com/Kevin in Bass, so it's KEVINNBASS /status, STATUS / you gotta write this down. Get a pen, pause here. If you're going to write this down, pause and get a pen. 140567516076660617. That is your Twitter thread that's going to go through all of this data. All of this data that I just went through. Scroll up to the top of that thread and read the thread. That's all the research. Except for the Kevin Hall study and the Satiety Index study, which I talked about. I gave the titles for those, and you guys can go find those as well and verify and confirm that I'm telling you the truth. Now again, I can see that adding modest amounts of protein to foods will likely increase the satiety of these foods, and that's for other reasons I haven't talked about here. If you integrate all of the evidence together, there's a modest impact of protein by adding more protein. Modest. And I'm all for it. 4 to 5 foods with protein. I love it. I'm going to add that to my paradigm and to the products I'm going to sell eventually. With caveats, important ones. And I'm going to be science-based about those caveats. I'm going to tell the truth. It's a modest factor. Other factors are more important, but this is a factor that will help. Other factors are more important. Focus on those other factors for optimal health. Okay, cool. I did those 2 debunking, those two core ideas of Ted's. Let's go hit some other peripheral ideas. Let's go smash them on some other peripheral ideas. Let's go hit him real hard on this one. This is from January 11th, 2019. He thinks that if you if you exercise with carbs, you're reducing the effects of exercise, because then you're gonna burn your carbs instead of you're gonna burn through carbs instead of burning through fat. So use protein to avoid burning through as much carbs, and that way you're gonna burn through more fat or something along those lines. Okay. Well, the thing is, if you hold energy intake constant, so you eat the same amount of calories either way, it doesn't matter if you're in a deficit, you're gonna burn through those carbs, you're gonna get into the fat no matter what. If you're taking in protein, you're gonna burn through that protein, get to the fat no matter what. If you're taking in fat, you're gonna burn through that dietary fat and get to the fat no matter what. So assuming everything's equal in terms of the calorie deficit, it doesn't matter what you exercise with. You're gonna induce fat oxidation and lose body fat. That's how science works. That's how energy balance works. And yet, and this is the core thing, he has this weird idea that because exercise, it needs to burn through carbs, it needs to burn through liver glycogen in order to get to the fat. You shouldn't do light exercise. You should do heavy exercise, like fast, vigorous exercise, because then you're going to burn through the glycogen and get to the fat quicker. This is total nonsense. All you have to do is be in a caloric deficit. And exercise does not modify fat loss. You do not get more fat loss with more exercise. That's what the data overwhelmingly show. I don't have a chance to go through that. Other people know that. Exercise is not an effective weight loss modality. The energy deficit is the core thing here. So if you're in an energy deficit, guess what's going to happen? Even if you're not burning through carbs during exercise, if you're in an energy deficit for the entire day, your glycogen is going to get burned through, just sitting there at rest. Your body's going to use up the glycogen because you're in an energy deficit, and it's going to tap into the fat. That's how it works, man. So this stuff about fueling enough, don't fuel more carbs than you burn through exercise, it's pseudoscience. You're going to burn through carbs at rest, man. Just make sure to eat in a calorie deficit. That's the third thing. Let's hit the fourth thing. He has this graph here, and we can just go through his website. This graph says biphasic hunger. And I don't know where he got this from, but apparently carbs increase ghrelin after 3 hours. Whereas if you eat these other foods, your ghrelin doesn't increase, therefore you're not as hungry. Well, we've seen in study after study after study after study, and we can go through all this long link. If people want to challenge me on this and drop it in the comments, Kevin, look this up. I'm not going to look it up right now. I've already looked it up. I already know what the studies say. But if you want to add a comment, you really want to find these studies and read the studies. Protein versus fat doesn't cause any difference in hunger. And what matters more is probably the fat source and the carbohydrate source and the protein source. All those matter much more than the macronutrients. The macronutrients don't matter. Okay? And already this violates PDE principles, because now it's not about fat or protein or whatever, or carbohydrate, and now it's about macronutrients. Now he's going back to his low carb spiel, his low carb days. And I found a really good one. Oh, this is... Oh, God. Well, he claims that eating carbs acutely is very satiating, and then he becomes hungry afterward. There's no evidence to support this. And if he's talking about like donuts and stuff, yeah, that might be true. But there's like no evidence to support this. So is that like, that's the fourth point? Is that we are? So we can go, I'll link the studies if you guys want to see them. I'll link it in the description if you ask in the comments. And I'll like thoroughly demolish it in the description. But I'm just saying, like, there's no evidence for this. This is total nonsense. He just made this up. That's number 4. So carbohydrate utilization and exercise, needing to burn through glycogen before you can start burning through fat, is number 3. Number 4 is that carbs inherently cause more hunger after like 3 hours, according to this fake graph he made up. And this is why it's maddening to me. This is why Ted is maddening to me. He drives me mad. But that's neither here nor there, friends, because now we're going to talk about cellular versus acellular foods. So acellular, like carbs, are like pasta and like grains that have been churned up, and it's because they've been refined. And then so like all the cellular wall outside of them has been broken down, and so that's apparently bad. This is really easy to refute. Look at the Japanese and white rice. What's the prevalence of obesity in Japan? Therefore, this isn't true. You can eat acellular carbs and be okay for satiety. It's not going to cause you to get metabolic syndrome to eat acellular carbs. And this idea comes from Spreadbury. I think he wrote this during his master's degree. And he says that you need to not eat grains because grains are acellular. And so this comes from Spreadbury, this nonsense from Spreadbury. And he says, replacing refined grains with whole grains yields only modest improvements to health, so you still need to get rid of refined grains. Again, look at oatmeal. Oatmeal is one of the most satiating foods around. Is he think oatmeal is an issue? So, for me, I'll tell you anecdotally about oatmeal. Oatmeal, I find incredibly satiating, and I don't need to eat even past lunch. I'll eat into the afternoon, just eating a big oatmeal breakfast with low protein intake. Oatmeal plus like a sweetener, like erythritol, plus monk fruit, plus like cranberries on top, or frozen berries on top. I eat that, and I don't want to eat until like the afternoon. So, it's wrong. All right, it's 5 points. If you want me to dive into even greater detail, this is already over an hour video long. It was supposed to be 5 points in 5 minutes. It's like an hour. It's exhausting doing this, but we can do in greater detail on all those points. If you really want to hit that, and you want me to go make a video on one of these points in particular to really like blow it up, that's great. I try to do the first 2 points in great comprehensive detail, citing half a dozen studies, showing Ted's response, showing how it doesn't make any sense, showing all like the details on the different studies, how to interpret them together, pull them together, how it doesn't make any sense. I concede protein is an important modest factor. Protein content is a modest factor, all else equal, in increasing satiety. If you emphasize just protein, the protein energy ratio or the protein percentage of foods, you're not going to do as well in weight loss as you would if you had a science-based perspective. This misinformation wastes people's time, it wastes people's resources, it keeps people obese. Many people find that it doesn't work because it's not based on science, so of course many people find it doesn't work. And yeah, I don't know. It's just nonsense, it's pseudoscience, I hate it. I hate the fact that Ted can't take criticism. Of course he can't take criticism because he's steeped in pseudoscience. So if he's steeped in pseudoscience, what is he going to do? He has to rehaul everything he does, rehaul everything he is. Of course he's not going to take criticism. He's not going to do that. Most people are not going to do that. The vast majority of people will not do that. Even people who have been scientific in the past, if they hold pseudoscientific beliefs and you challenge them on them, generally they won't yield, almost always. Especially if they have a stake in it, which he does. Okay, you guys can tell I'm exhausted now, but I went through all that stuff. If you guys have any questions, comments, it's great. Check out my website, thewars.com. Check out how to support me at thewars.com/support me, please. Check out my Patreon, man. Ladies and gentlemen, I think 94% of my followers are men. I have a bro channel and a bro following. I don't know how to improve that. I don't think I'm like, maybe it's the beard, but whatever. So ladies and gentlemen, the small portion of ladies, the 1 in 20 listeners is a lady. Ladies and gentlemen, check out my Patreon as well, and my Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. That's going to be Kevin Baskett, VINNBASS, 2 N's. And check out YouTube channel, K-Bass Philadelphia, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, The Kevin Bass Show. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts, a review and a rating, unless you're a Ted Naiman follower, in which case don't leave a review. Scram, because I don't want your review. But you can leave a 1-star review if you like. If you're sure that I'm wrong about everything. And then what else? Hope you guys liked it. I hope you enjoyed. Leave feedback if there's something else I can improve and make better. I'm listening. I'm implementing new changes all the time. I can't make these podcasts shorter, man. I love these long podcasts. I love talking in great detail. And also, if I'm gonna debunk somebody, I gotta go through everything, man. I can't just superficial, oh, you're wrong. No, I'm gonna debunk. And I'm gonna hit it hard. And if you want more references, we'll get more references for you, my friends. If this is popular, if people really want it, what the people want, I will give the people. If you want more references, we'll do that. So let me know. Share this if you thought it was helpful. If you thought it's not helpful, I'm in Texas. Come get me. Hopefully not. Hope you guys liked it again. Peace out, my friends.